There are moments in the life of a nation when history seems to lean forward, studying the present like a cryptic message it is trying to decode. The atmosphere thickens. The public's pulse changes rhythm. Conversations take on a different edge, sharper at the ends, as if everyone can feel something moving beneath the surface, but no one can quite name it. Economies can function, governments can operate, institutions can stand. Yet a subtle tremor stretches through the ordinary, hinting that the familiar architecture of civic life is under pressure. Those who pay close attention to long arcs of political change sense patterns repeating, not in identical form, but as variations on old themes. It is as though nations have their own seasons, and when the world cools into the wrong temperature long enough, societies drift toward a predictable sequence of upheaval. The idea of a six-stage revolutionary pattern is less prophecy than observation, a distillation of tendencies that have surfaced in multiple historical contexts. When enough stresses accumulate, economic, cultural, political, psychological, a society reaches developmental phases that resemble one another across time and place. Not because people consciously imitate previous revolutions, but because human beings, placed under similar pressures, respond in broadly similar ways. Stage 1 typically begins quietly, the way tension builds before a storm. A sense of disconnect between leaders and the public, soft anxieties about the direction of the country, a feeling that the social contract is fraying. By Stage 2, grievances pool together and sharpen. Stage 3 brings acceleration, more confrontational politics, louder rhetoric, a spreading sense that something fundamental is at stake. Stage 4, however, is the pivot. It is the moment when the instability stops being ambient and starts becoming kinetic. Not necessarily violent, not necessarily catastrophic, but unmistakably transformative. Stage 4 is when the current stops flowing underneath and begins to cut through the surface. In the thriller of a nation's evolution, Stage 4 is the point in the script when the camera zooms in, the music tightens, and the stakes snap into clarity. And if the United States stands anywhere today in this generalized, abstracted framework, it is in the thick coils of that fourth stage. The pivotal segment when the system reveals whether it will bend, break, or reinvent itself. The extraordinary thing about this stage is how deceptively normal life can appear from the outside. People go to work, children go to school, markets fluctuate but continue to operate, elections still happen, the outward shell remains intact. What changes is the interior temperature of public life. The trust reservoir evaporates faster. Consensus becomes rarer. The national mood oscillates rapidly between hope and despair. Every event lands with the force of a test. Does the society still have the resilience to navigate challenges, or has its connective tissue thinned too much? The United States, with its vast resources, its robust economy, its inventive culture, and its centuries of constitutional structure, has extraordinary shock absorbers. Yet even the strongest bridge can groan under weight if too many trucks try to cross at once. Stage 4 is not defined by collapse. It is defined by a contest over direction. It is a decision point. The thrilling tension of this phase comes not from knowing what will happen, but from knowing that what happens next will matter more than anything that happened before. In Stage 4, society becomes a battleground of narratives. Every faction believes it has the correct interpretation of events. Every group claims the mantle of patriotism. Every competing vision insists it is fighting for the soul of the nation. This narrative clash is not merely political. Politics is just the surface expression of deeper disagreements. What is really being contested is the country's identity, the meaning of freedom, the nature of fairness, the the lines between rights and responsibilities. People argue about policy, but beneath those policy debates, they are really arguing about what America is and what it should become. Economics fuels much of this stage's momentum. When people sense uncertainty about their financial future, whether from rising costs, stagnant wages, debt burdens, job insecurity, or shifts in global competition, they grow more sensitive to political signals. Economic anxiety by itself doesn't cause revolutionary pressure, but it acts as a solvent, loosening bonds of trust. When combined with cultural polarization and institutional strain, it adds weight to every grievance. In Stage 4, the economy doesn't need to be failing. It only needs to feel unpredictable enough that people start questioning whether the system as a whole is delivering on its promises. This creates a psychological pattern similar to that seen before major market corrections. Traders begin reading every headline as a potential turning point. The market becomes jumpy. Investors oscillate between fear and greed with unnatural speed. The fundamentals may remain intact, but perception twists them into something more ominous. Similarly, a country in Stage 4 digests every news cycle with heightened adrenaline. Ordinary decisions by institutions are interpreted through partisan lenses. Rumors travel faster than facts. People become alert to threats, real or imagined. This is not hysteria. It is a form of collective vigilance. Societies under strain become highly attuned to signals in the environment, the way animals become alert in the forest before a storm. In this atmosphere, institutions face their own stress tests. Every controversial court ruling, every surprise election outcome, every economic policy shift, every leadership turnover becomes a referendum on the system's legitimacy. The hallmark of Stage 4 is contestation over institutional meaning. One side views institutions as essential guardians against chaos. Another sees them as obstacles preventing needed reforms. A third group, growing in such periods, becomes disillusioned with both narratives, unable to trust either the defenders or the reformers. This third faction often ends up determining the trajectory of the next stage, because their disengagement or re-engagement acts as a tipping force. The thrilling and unnerving element of this stage is that no one knows who will win the battle of narratives. Stage 4 is inherently unstable, not because instability is constant, but because stability and instability alternate with unusual rapidity. One week feels calm, optimistic. The next feels volatile. The population's emotional temperature swings. Confidence evaporates and reappears. Analysts predict both renaissance and decline with equal conviction. This oscillation creates a sense that anything might be possible, for better or worse. And yet, beneath the intensity, there is a hidden logic at work. Every nation that has passed through a similar generalized pattern has faced a moment where the public's relationship to the system had to be renegotiated. Stage 4 is when that renegotiation begins in earnest. It is the moment when society stops assuming that tomorrow will resemble yesterday and begins consciously designing what tomorrow should be. This is why the stage is so charged. It's not just about conflicts, it's about possibilities. It carries the tension of a locked room with multiple exits, each leading to a dramatically different future. Economic structures are especially sensitive at this moment. Whether the issue is debt, inequality, the cost of living, technological disruption, or the transition to new industries, financial systems become mirrors in which the country examines its anxieties. Money is never just money in Stage 4, it becomes a symbol. To some, it represents security and stability. To others, it is evidence of injustice. To still others, it is a gauge of whether the old model is compatible with a rapidly changing world. the economy becomes the stage on which the drama of inequality, opportunity, and trust plays out. And because money touches every life, economic tension multiplies emotional tension, amplifying the stakes of every political or cultural conflict. Stage 4 is where different groups start to believe that time is running out for peaceful solutions. This belief is not necessarily accurate, but perceptions drive behavior. When people fear that the window for constructive change is closing, they push harder, speak louder, compromise less. They begin to fear that conceding even small points could lead to catastrophic losses. This creates a sense of urgency that turns negotiation into struggle and normal disagreements into existential battles. What makes this stage thrilling from a narrative standpoint and profoundly important from a civic standpoint is that the outcome is not predetermined. History shows that Stage 4 can lead to renewal if institutions manage to adapt and the public regains a sense of shared purpose. But it can also lead to fragmentation if divisions harden and trust collapses. The margin between these paths is razor thin. A few key decisions, a few pivotal moments, can tilt the trajectory of an entire generation. In the United States today, the core tension revolves around whether the country can still narrate a shared story. Nations survive turmoil when the public maintains a belief that despite disagreements, they are ultimately playing for the same team. When that belief erodes, politics becomes zero-sum, and zero-sum politics accelerates Stage 4 dynamics. It is not that Americans disagree more today than in some previous eras. It is that the disagreements feel less negotiable. The competing visions for national identity have become more sharply defined. One group yearns for restoration of past norms. Another pushes for rapid transformation. A third tries to thread a path between them. A fourth rejects all existing frameworks altogether. When these visions collide, the friction produces heat, and heat is the currency of Stage 4. The media environment amplifies this effect. Information flows at a relentless pace, and each person can curate their own universe of facts. This splintering of informational reality accelerates the feeling that society is diverging into parallel worlds. In Stage 4, information becomes not just a resource, but a battleground. Every headline becomes a weapon or a shield. Every narrative becomes a strategic tool. The speed of communication transforms disagreements into flashpoints within hours. The pressure cooker effect intensifies. Small sparks that once dissipated now ignite broader reactions. The digital environment also reshapes the emotional architecture of the public sphere. Outrage becomes contagious. Hope does too, but it spreads slower. Fear travels the fastest, and in Stage 4, fear becomes a kind of social currency. People trade warnings, predictions, anxieties. They bond over shared threats. And yet, this very environment also gives rise to counter-movements emphasizing community, resilience, and local cohesion. The contradiction is central to Stage 4. The same catalysts that drive division can inspire unity, depending on how people respond. Economically, the stage produces paradoxes. Some sectors boom, while others languish. Some people experience unprecedented opportunities, while others feel left behind. Technological breakthroughs coexist with job uncertainties. Innovation accelerates just as financial anxieties deepen. These contradictions feed into the larger narrative struggle. People try to interpret the meaning of the chaos. Is the system failing, transforming, being reborn, or simply passing through turbulence on its way to a new equilibrium? The uncanny tension of Stage 4 is that all these interpretations can feel true simultaneously. And so the country finds itself in a psychological posture similar to a protagonist entering the third act of a thriller. The audience leans forward, not because they know the ending, but because they know the ending matters. The protagonist, the nation, must make choices, confront weaknesses, rediscover strengths, and decide what values it refuses to abandon. The pressure is immense, but so is the potential for clarity. Stage 4 is the crucible where a country decides what kind of future it deserves. As the United States moves within this generalized, abstracted stage, the financial system becomes a diagnostic instrument. It reveals where the pressure points lie. When household budgets strain, when generational wealth divides grow wider, when debates ignite over the fairness of taxation or the sustainability of public spending, the economy is acting as the canary in the coal mine. But the canary is not predicting collapse. It is signaling transformation. The financial conversation becomes a way for the public to articulate fears and aspirations. It is not just about numbers, it is about meaning. Money in Stage 4 takes on a moral dimension. People ask whether the economy rewards effort or exploitation, whether opportunity is widely accessible or concentrated, whether the future feels attainable or obstructed. These questions mirror the deeper struggles at the heart of the stage. They reflect a society trying to reconcile its ideals with its realities. It is possible, indeed common, for a nation to pass through Stage 4 without descending into the more destructive phases that historically followed in certain contexts. Stage 4 is not a prophecy of doom. It is a description of pressure. Pressure can produce breakdown, but it can also produce breakthroughs. The thrilling uncertainty lies in the fact that the next chapter depends on collective choices yet to be made. No outcome is locked in. The United States has navigated internal strains before. It has experienced political upheavals, economic shocks, cultural transformations, and institutional crises. Each time, the country faced a version of Stage 4 dynamics. Sometimes the outcome was turbulent, sometimes it ushered in renewal. What determines the outcome is not the presence of conflict, but the capacity for constructive response. If the American people can reclaim a shared narrative, one that acknowledges differences without letting those differences become fatal, then Stage 4 becomes a gateway to strengthening democracy, revitalizing economic opportunity, and reinforcing the social contract. If the nation falters in that task, the tension of the stage may harden into more entrenched polarization. But nothing is inevitable. The story is still being written. The choices have not yet been made. As the country stands in this pivotal phase, the most important truth is that the future remains open. Stage 4 is not the end of the story, it is the moment before the turning point. It is the dramatic pause before the music swells. It is the narrowing tunnel that leads to a clearing. If the nation has the courage to advance rather than retreat. America's greatest advantage is not its wealth, its military, its innovations, or its institutions, though all of those matter. Its greatest advantage is the capacity of its people to imagine a better future and fight for it without destroying the foundations that make collective striving possible. Stage 4 tests that capacity. It asks whether Americans can move beyond fear, beyond grievance, beyond the gravitational pull of polarized narratives, and rediscover the ambition that defined previous eras of renewal. The outcome will not be determined by elites alone, nor by any single movement, nor by any single election. It will be determined by millions of decisions made quietly, daily, in homes, workplaces, communities. It will be shaped by whether people choose engagement over withdrawal, curiosity over contempt, resilience over despair. In the thriller of a nation's evolution, Stage 4 is the moment of maximum tension. But it is also the moment of maximum possibility. It is the chapter where the protagonist's deepest values are tested and revealed. The United States is not at a predetermined destination. It is at a crossroads where every path forward requires courage. The old map no longer applies. New maps are being drawn in real time. The stakes are high, but so is the potential. And somewhere beyond the uncertainty, beyond the conflict of visions, beyond the economic anxieties and cultural battles, lies the chance to write a future that feels worthy of the nation's past and its promise. The outcome is not yet written. The next chapter begins with the choices made now.